God made us in His image and likeness. A short film has become quite popular on various social media platforms, one that suggests that perhaps God's appearance is quite different from what we've been taught. What if God is something completely different from anything we've seen in the Bible? What if the biblical scriptures are merely versions of stories that humans have tried to manipulate to ease the terror that an omnipotent being beyond our comprehension might provoke? In the next few minutes, we'll do a detailed analysis of the short film and examine other materials that address similar themes. So get ready to explore a different perspective on God's form and delve into the concept of cosmic horror. In 2022, independent director Dylan Clark presented one of his most interesting short film works, one where he establishes a premise in which the Christian God we know is nothing like what we've been taught in Scripture. The short film runs just over 7 minutes and was made with a budget of less than $500, accumulating more than 6.3 million views on YouTube to date. Some have criticized it, especially from a religious perspective, while others believe it's a terrifying gem. Let's analyze what this short film is about. The short film begins with Exodus 33:20, which tells us that no man who can directly see God will live. Remember this well, because it will be very important during the short film. Later, we see a girl enter a dark projection room, probably a religious student named Mia Riley, who takes out her phone and activates the recorder to time and prepare her presentation about an ancient painting called the Portrait of God. This presentation begins by discussing what God would look like if we could see Him directly, and how she will now show us an image that we should look at while trying to identify what can be seen in it. In the image, we see what appears to be nothing more than a black square. The girl explains that to many people, it just looks like an empty image, without any content. But there are also reports from all over the world of people who have analyzed the painting and have seen something very strange, to the point of drawing too much attention. Some claim to have seen strange and even terrifying details in the painting. At that moment, the girl plays the audio testimonies of each of these people, and we hear how some describe seeing an extremely thin humanoid being, while others describe it as an elderly woman. The audio becomes even more terrifying when one person even describes what they see in the painting as a frightening monster that seems to have a horrible smile. The audio continues playing, and the girl becomes somewhat nervous due to the darkness of the place and the eerie testimonies, so she starts touching the crucifix she wore around her neck. The last of the audio recordings is of a man saying that despite seeing a horrible monster, he was overwhelmed by a sensation of something beautiful. The girl continues her practice, saying that maybe these are just tricks of light, people hallucinating things, excessive faith from people who yearn to see something. But she was quite intrigued by how similar all these testimonies were, leading her to assume that perhaps they were witnessing some kind of spiritual revelation. She ends her practice wondering how it's possible that these people can see God and we cannot. What makes them special? There, her practice seems to end, but she actually starts over, resetting the recorder to begin again and ensure she has it completely mastered. She begins again reciting the same words, asking what God's appearance might be and explaining that, at this point, she will show us an image called the Portrait of God. But this time, something completely different happens. Something very strange powerfully catches her attention. The girl looks at the painting and seems to feel something, a strange sensation. At the same time, she seems to see a form, perhaps something she hadn't seen before. Before her look of surprise, which will soon turn to fear, we can see that very faintly, something starts to appear in the image. First, there seem to be two bright eyes. She gets scared, and quickly, we see that a kind of silhouette, a body, also becomes visible. At first, the girl finds it quite curious, but she quickly starts getting nervous and decides to raise the projector screen to make the image disappear. We see her with a terrified face and manage to see that the image was becoming much more defined as the screen was rising. However, something strange happens. Without the screen, a pair of bright eyes can still be seen on the wall. They're still there. She doesn't know what's happening, but suddenly we hear a noise and see the eyes move in her direction. They were alive. She, terrified, tries to run out of the room. She doesn't even take her things. She simply flees toward the door. When she was about to leave, she closes the door but is instantly transported to another room without light, dark. The girl, completely frightened, still doesn't know what she's dealing with, But she knows that whatever that thing is, it's there in the room with her, she can hear it. We also notice the breathing of what seems to be a creature, like an animal. We as spectators can also feel the presence somewhere in that room, very close to her in the darkness. The bright eyes reveal themselves again, this time approaching the girl. The woman is very frightened, takes her crucifix, and starts praying, begging that thing to leave her alone. With her eyes closed, suddenly we see that out of nowhere, a hand appears in the darkness, grabs her face, making her turn in its direction. We see the humanoid being from the painting, but when she opens her eyes, a strange and intense light shines directly onto her face. We see that the girl becomes totally hypnotized by this light, and it's so powerful that her iris starts to glow as well. All this to discover that the girl was still in the initial room where everything had begun. But we see her totally paralyzed, with swollen eyes, crying, and looking at the painting. We see that her hand is still squeezing the crucifix so hard that it's now dripping blood from the pressure, completely static looking at the painting. And we can see her phone and notice that in that span of minutes, actually more than 3 hours have passed, and she has remained standing there, looking at the image, apparently hypnotized, only in another dimension. And when the camera points forward, we can notice that there was absolutely nothing there in front. But despite everything, the girl seems to be terrifyingly happy. Right there, the short film ends. Without a doubt, it's a simple short film that says a lot with so little and touches on some creepy themes that we'll analyze next. Apparently, there exists a black painting that metaphorically, or so we thought at first, is a representation of God. The girl's presentation will be about this topic because many people claim to have seen something in this painting that apparently had nothing. But if you looked at it closely, you realized it wasn't empty. When the girl looks at it closely, she seems to become trapped under the painting's spell and is somehow transported to a vision where she tries to escape. Unfortunately, she becomes hypnotized in the painting's world, so whatever she saw or whatever exists in the painting has completely consumed her brain. In the end, we see her smile because she probably feels the same sensation that the people in the recorded testimonies had mentioned. Despite seeing something horrible, they feel something extremely beautiful inside them. So whatever is in the painting now has her trapped in this other world. The theme of this short film is fascinating. The truth is that religion tends to humanize its gods too much, to the point where they end up behaving like us humans. This is something classic that we see especially in the Judeo-Christian Bible. A God with feelings of anger, love, concern, drastic decisions, and even disappointment. Sometimes behaving like a father and other times like a punisher, assuming that this God thinks like us humans. We tend to forget that the power of a creator of worlds or universes, who should be omnipotent or omniscient, would be at such a high level of consciousness that thinking they could have a limited brain like ours with feelings based on concepts segregated in their brain is something too naive, to put it mildly. A God would go beyond our comprehension, beyond any rule we might want to impose. That's why I always say that we actually create our gods in our image and likeness to make sense of concepts in the world that we didn't understand. That's why gods tend to be peculiarly the best and wisest versions of ourselves, or demons the most evil and terrifying versions of ourselves. But this is just an excuse to explain something we don't understand, because if we understand God as a being with cosmic levels of magnificence, we could never understand it. Therefore, a being that is at a superior and even multidimensional level could be too much for our eyes, our brain, or our consciousness. This idea has been extensively explored in cosmic horror stories and tales, of beings that are so omnipotent and cosmic that merely being in front of them would drive us to madness, to our destruction. Have you ever wondered what ants think when they see us crushing their worlds? Surely we are like gods to them. In fact, I found this topic so fascinating that I explored this idea in a video where I analyze how we, from an ant's perspective, are authentic beings of cosmic horror. If you're interested in delving deeper into this idea, you'll find the video in the description and at the end of this video. Another of the most interesting theories in this field is that of multi-dimensions, and how our dimension or our brain capacity limits us to this, our third dimension. That is, humans are three-dimensional, so the world works for us based on latitude, longitude, and altitude. But anything beyond that, we might not even be able to understand. What am I saying, understand? We couldn't even see it, since our body, our eyes, and our brain wouldn't be designed for that multidimensional level. Carl Sagan explains it simply and splendidly. What happens when a square that's in 2D talks to a cube that's in 3D? Actually, the square can't see the cube because a square is just one face of the cube. So if a square were to talk to a cube, it would think it was talking to another square. Just as when humans see some phenomenon we call paranormal or unexplainable, it could be nothing more than another being moving in its own higher dimension. And here we're talking about gods, and they would surely be several dimensions above us. That is, if they aren't the ones who created all dimensions. So imagine what possibility we have of being able to see something so apotheotic or trying to understand it. Having said all this, what do you think would be God's true form? There are people all over the world, religious and spiritual, who believe that you can reach a certain level of consciousness and faith where you can literally visualize it. You probably know someone who has told you something similar sometime in your life. But let's think about God. Do you really believe it would simply be a giant man who reigns in heaven, or some kind of light that could blind us with its magnificence? If a God existed, it would be something we can't even imagine. Therefore, if you can't even imagine it, it's indescribable, and the indescribable is unknowable. What do you think about this perspective of cosmic horror applied to divinity? I invite you to reflect on these ideas and share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this analysis interesting, don't hesitate to share it with others who might find it fascinating. Until next time, seekers of knowledge,